What an exhilarating trip to Israel. How many of you watched our video blogs, our daily video blogs? Okay, so most of you have a pretty good idea of the enormous excitement and unique experience we had. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, I urge you to do that. And if you plan on being with us on Monday night, try and do it before Monday night. On Monday evening, I'll be joined here on the Bema by at least 7 other colleagues. We think there'll be about 10 religious leaders, possibly more, senior religious leaders here in New York, so that we can all share with you and their congregants as well some impressions and perspectives of our trip. Collectively, our houses of worship are home to tens of thousands of New Yorkers. I confess that even I was taken by surprise by the spiritual energy that the 15 of us generated. You know, faith is a remarkable human emotion. Even I, who've been around religious figures practically my entire life, even I was captivated by the enormous spiritual power in our group. And I was moved. It was new even to me. Others felt it as well. The people we met were, I think, taken aback, not only by the composition of our group, rabbis, ministers, and imams, who ever heard of such a thing in Israel? But they were also impressed by the religious energy we produced. So much spiritual force in such a small, contained space. Frankly, I think that some of the people we met were a bit intimidated. Mind you, not that such intimidation exists in our own congregations here in New York. I've never met a Jew who's been intimidated by a rabbi. There's no such thing. But we met many diverse people in Israel and the Palestinian territories, and that part of the world had never quite seen a group like ours. And the very nature of the group was unprecedented and intimidating. When you take serious, reflective religious leaders out of their daily grind and pressures and responsibilities, and you allow them to come together to let down their hair and to be alone on a spiritual quest, it's really quite amazing. I wish that you could have been a fly on the wall to observe our deliberations and interactions. We will produce a full-length documentary video that will allow access into our mission so that people can get a flavor of what it was like. We didn't simply wish to spend time together. We wanted as many people as possible to see what we did and how we did it. And again, I'm grateful to all of you who encouraged me to plan and lead this mission, and to those of you who are here who helped fund this endeavor, all of whom are members of the Stephen Wise Free Synagogue. We had a number of key objectives on the mission. Tonight I want to share 2 with you. First, we wanted to model a positive approach to religious interaction. In the post-9/11 world, religious rapprochement is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. To ignore dialogue is to invite destruction. If we do not find ways to live together in dignity, we will die together in agony. Religious moderates must build bridges of coexistence, or religious extremists will burn the last bridges of peace. Our presence in the Middle East was intended to broadcast that we can live together, work together, travel together, dream together, and build together. In a world awash in religious conflict, we wish to model a different way, the way of coexistence, respect, and peace. We did not intend to paper over any differences. We did not seek to avoid the tough issues. We treated each other like adults. The world needs real religious dialogue. False dialogue is akin to silence. Dialogue is only productive when people remain who they are and speak their minds. From the outset, I was very clear about who we are. At Stephen Wise, we start with a Zionist identity. Our support of Israel, while not uncritical, is unconditional. We see our role as preserving, protecting, and advancing the most consequential creation of the Jewish people in 2,000 years, the State of Israel. We do not see our role as joining Israel's enemies and opponents in bashing the Jewish state. To the contrary, we seek to counter the false impressions often created by such critics, Jews and Gentiles alike. In this, we remain loyal to the founding vision of Rabbi Wise and the founding generations of this synagogue, your own predecessors, who supported, funded, and encouraged Rabbi Wise in all of his enormous efforts in leading the Zionist movement in the United States. Those of you who believe, by the way, that freedom of the pulpit was Wise's primary preoccupation are wrong. The principle of a free pulpit, the free in our name, was already one in the early 20th century, and historically speaking, it was small potatoes. Rabbi Stephen Wise and this synagogue were dedicated primarily to the centrality of the Jewish people and its most eloquent contemporary expression, the Zionist movement and the State of Israel. Israel's a remarkable place. It's nothing like the Israel of the media. One might be forgiven if one was never there and their impression is of a place that is overrun by ultra-Orthodox fanatics and ruthless soldiers who live to oppress Palestinians. Like any other place, Israel has its share of fanatics. But broadly speaking, Israel pulsates with energy. It is a modern, noisy democracy with cutting-edge technology filled with people who are industrious, entrepreneurial, warm-hearted, and passionate. It is one of the world's most interesting places. Tel Aviv is a world-class city, often leading musical, cultural, intellectual, literary, and culinary trends. Tel Aviv was recently chosen as one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world. Women are fighter pilots, military officers. The Chief Justice of the Israeli Supreme Court, the leader of the opposition in parliament, the leader of the Labor Party are women. We began our last day at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum, and took a bus directly from there to the President's house. A trip of perhaps 3 miles, but those 3 miles covered 3 millennia of Jewish history. From the death camps to the house of the president of the Jewish state in a 10-minute drive, it is not to be believed. That's what I wanted to convey to all of the religious leaders, in particular to the non-Jewish colleagues. You can't get this from a headline. You can't get this from a dispatch from Jerusalem. I don't expect non-Jewish colleagues, or even Jews for that matter, to be more Zionist than the Israeli prime minister. But I did want them to see for themselves what all of the noise is about. To feel the power of the creation and recreation of the Jewish collectivity, and to go home more confused and less certain and more modest about the reasons for the struggle and the prospects for peace. On the way to the meeting with Shimon Peres, I took the microphone on the bus and put this 10-minute drive in perspective. I suggested to my colleagues that Zionism was infused both with extreme optimism and enormous pessimism at one and the same time. It was optimistic because Theodor Herzl asserted that a Jewish state can be recreated through the sweat of our brow, here and now, in the 20th century. Hardly anyone believed him back then. They thought that he was mad. Rabbi Wise became an outcast in the Reform movement because he was one of only a handful of Reform rabbis who dared to challenge the arrogant, destructive, anti-Zionist orthodoxy of the Reform movement at that time. After 2,000 years, to bring the remnants of the Jewish people scattered in the four corners of the world back to the promised land. This was madness. And yet Herzl insisted, if we want it, in 50 years, we will recreate the Jewish state. 50 years later, practically to the day, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the creation of the state of Israel. But Zionism was rooted in an essentially pessimistic worldview, that the Jews could not assimilate in Europe. The only way to solve the Jewish problem is to get the Jews out of the way and to create a state of the Jews. Even the most advanced and most liberal civilizations in the history of the world, France and Germany, would ultimately devour its Jewish citizens, Herzl cautioned, a prediction that was tragically materialized. And to go from Yad Vashem, the memorial to the inability of European Jews to get out of the way, to the symbolic head of the free Jewish state, is a journey not to be believed. Now that's where I started from. Yet we must realize that our friends have different opinions and different historical experiences. We must find ways to live together. We must learn, explore, discover, and carve out the largest possible area of coexistence and understanding. Given the nature of the world today, given the destructive potential of weapons of mass destruction, we must broadcast the principles of religious pluralism, coexistence, and peace, and find the broadest common denominator amongst us. Time after time, the people we met, including the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Salam Fayyad, told us that religion must play a central role in the reconciliation in the Middle East. On our first day, we met the head of the Latin Patriarchy. He told us that when Pope John Paul visited Israel in the year 2000, there was a desire for representatives of the three religions, the Pope, the chief rabbi, and the head imam, to plant an olive tree together in Jerusalem as a sign of peace. Ultimately, they couldn't arrange it because they feared that their hands might touch and they might contaminate one another. Our mission to Israel was intended to encourage that our hands touch and our hearts meet in our common pursuit of understanding, coexistence, and peace. And that was our second objective, to promote peace in that part of the world that is so central to our three religious traditions. It was a tough trip. We visited the heart of the conflict. There were moments of despair. We met with presidents, prime ministers, members of parliaments, and mayors on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian divide. We met with priests, imams, and rabbis. We met with journalists, academics, students, villagers, and farmers. Daily headlines do not begin to tell the story. None of the people we met, not one, believed that the Middle East is closer to peace today than 12 years before. If this is the truth, we need to hear it. Progress rests on the solid rock of reality, not the shifting sands of fantasy. But despite it all, many of us returned to New York guardedly optimistic. None of the people we met, not one, felt that the status quo was sustainable. Everyone understood that a different way must be found to break out of the suffocating reality. There is broad agreement that a new future must be forged. There is broad agreement in Israel, the entire mainstream of the political spectrum, including the current Israeli government, that the solution is two states for two peoples with territorial compromise. The whole discussion is about which slivers of territory will be on what side. These are agonizing discussions because they involve such deep-seated questions of history, identity, security, and dignity. Most Israelis, and we were told most Palestinians, realize that neither is going anywhere. They are destined to share this land. There is no other way. The only question is how many people must suffer and die before the reconciliation will come. You know, Jews aren't good at ruling over other people. We're too open, too pluralistic, too diverse, too humane, too intellectual to take the measures that are necessary to suppress another people. Stalin was good at that. Mubarak was good at that. Gaddafi was good at that. Assad is good at that. Ahmadinejad is good at that. Not us. We can't do it. We don't have it in us. Sooner or later, when circumstances ripen, there will be peace. Our role is to continue to preach the message and to join with others who are working daily for peace. There are many good people working on coexistence. In Haifa, we met Christians, Muslims, and Jews who have built a true house of coexistence. In Tel Aviv, we met doctors, nurses, and hospital staff who treated illness without regard to race, religion, or creed. At the Rabin Medical Center, we met an Israeli-Palestinian doctor whose position is funded by one of our own members at Stephen Wise, and whose responsibilities include outreach to the Palestinian community and persuading them to take advantage of Israel's cutting-edge medical facilities. Even on the Gaza border, in Israeli towns that were fired upon by thousands and thousands of missiles, there were people who were reaching out to the other side. Peace is made piece by piece, from the bottom up. Progress is advanced day by day, person by person, each laboring in their own corner of the universe, connecting with others who together create an irresistible force. We should connect with those people and strengthen their hand. This daily labor is heroic work. Jewish sages ask, who is a hero? And they respond, he who turns an enemy into a friend. This is our task, person by person, to turn enemies into friends. Amen.